So I'm Camille. So as I said before, I'm working from her. And today I'd like to talk a bit about what I call social avatar robots. So it's a bit outside of all the topics we had this morning because a lot was on VR. I'm going more on the robots. But nicely, we had already talked a bit on avatar. But first, I would like to come back a bit on what's an avatar. I think everyone uses avatar in his everyday life, mostly social media, images, because just an icon is an avatar of yourself. You choose it, and because you choose it, it represents something from you. You may like the object you're choosing, everything. A picture of myself is an avatar. It's my physical representation. Or every game avatar is kind of representation. It's embody what I would do in the game. But if the meaning of an avatar is about representing physical, abstract, or even an ideal, first, an avatar has a special definition. And it comes from a long time ago, because it comes from Sanskrit, so it's years and years ago, and it means avatar. And avatar has a meaning of descent, because the term avatar was first created for gods descending on earth. So it was not just simply representation, but an incarnation of the gods. They came on earth as an avatar and they helped people. And that's the meaning I'm most interested in. Why? Well, it's because I'm talking about the robots, and particularly an avatar robots. And what makes that interesting is because compared to all those kind of mediums with VR, you're in the physical world with the robot. So it's not just simply a medium to go in another virtual world, it's coming back here. And which make it kind of an incarnation, just a robotic incarnation of yourself. But how does it work? Because it's not just about human and robot. It's really two humans discussing. And as you can see in the picture here, you have a kind of big setup where you have kind of controller here who's actually sending motion data to robots. So it's not just joystick, it's you're controlling the arms of the robot. So every feedback from you go to the robot. On the other side, you have another interaction, whereas there's a human just in front of a robot, plus a robot, and that's a human-robot interaction. So you have all those kind of effects that come from interacting robots, or the vision, everything. And all those information you got from the robot are sent back to the user through different devices. So for example, here you have a picture of one of our robots we use for experiment, and we put some kind of devices on it, which help get in touch, because a robot doesn't have inherent touch feedback. So we wanted to permit to have the human transmitting their touch to control the robot. And what makes it interesting is actually the richness of a medium, because the robot it's all the kind of representation you can get from VR, but really physical, and that's the point. Physical is the most important, and that tends to maybe make it one of the most, I would say, one of the most interesting and nearest to the definition of what we call of presence. So the sense of being somewhere, the sense of being somewhere. We also with like co-present with someone else, and this robot is able to englobe it. A little example. Here is the example of our setup.
We're going to fix the speakers, but keep going.
Okay. Right. So here was one of my colleagues. So we tried to put the setup in motion. So the idea is here you have a robot. So you have a human in front, you have a robot, and it should be interacting. And what we are doing right now was testing the touch, because touch was added after. And we make sure that it was working, because the touch he felt was not like on his body directly. It was using those kind of devices, which is actually don't represent real touch, but just vibration. But that was a way to send it, to send all this kind of information you couldn't get without it. And while it could be considered really good, it is a rich medium, it also is kind of bad perk. Mostly first is, I mean, it's a robot, so try to make it human, and then you start to make it a bit weird. We tried here to put human face. Well, people tended to not like it much because it's not really human, doesn't feel human. It's a bit creepy, maybe. But what also, another interesting thing about this medium is that, again, it's physical. So you have that idea that you're not just in front of a picture or anything, and that can touch you. Here you have really a robot that actually can touch you. And you have that idea that maybe it's not safe to be touched by a robot, or touching a robot. And that's actually what happened during one experiment. And so the setup you saw before, yeah? During the experiment, we had 4 scenarios, and for the first scenario, we have a woman coming, and then she started trying to interact, and then the robot started to completely go crazy, and like, oops. And this woman just completely get outside of the range of the robot. She was scared. And what happened is, when we resume after, never she came back at less than 1.5 meters of the robot. She was so scared. She couldn't feel again being in that interaction. She didn't feel any experience. She was just scared. And she told us, obviously, after. And that's where I'm like, yes, it has so much potential. It has so much thing. But with a robot, you have so much more issues coming. And so much other variables that come from the physical world. And how to cope with that? Because how can you say at some point that they can really feel present? Because if you ask them further present, and they will say yes, but then after you say, do you feel safe with the robot? Do you feel you'll be able to really interact with it? And then they start saying no. They're like, how can you really feel present? How can you really feel being with the other if you're not able to do the things you would do if that person was actually there? So that's one of the questions that came to my mind at some point, saying, well, presence obviously is self-perception, but at the same time, the medium, and depending on medium, you can have a really big load of issues. Another point, which actually the one made me really interested in avatar mediation, is what I call asymmetry. And how I would define it is when you have a mediated interaction, most of the time, most medium make it symmetric. So let's say video conferencing, you see the other, you can speak with the other, and this opposite side is the same. At least it should be. Cell phone is the same. You can hear the voice of the other, you can speak, on the other side they can do the same. Even in VR, most meeting in VR, yes, you don't have the same media, you don't have the same avatar or anything, but there's still this kind of symmetry where I'm just a little avatar in VR and you are too. In this case, it's not possible because it's real robot in front of you. So that makes the interaction completely asymmetric. You don't feel the same way the touch. You don't feel the motion of the person the same way. You can't really interact the same way. It's not possible because one is just a human with a robot, while the other is actually a human-human interaction, but with a lot of devices around. So it's making it completely asymmetric. During my PhD, at the beginning of my PhD, I did a little experiment. It was COVID, so obviously no touch on the robot. It's sad, but that's how it is. So we did with video conferencing. And we said, well, true, it's a asymmetric system, but we can force it asymmetric. So we decided, okay, in that case, let's just remove video, because then you have one person with just access to hearing something, and the other one could really see the person. So that's what we did, and we did a little comparison between if those people were just getting audio, or both people getting video, and this kind of asymmetric interaction. So that's what we get from this. And interestingly, we got some results which were not really expected. And that was that in asymmetric interaction, we both measure some elements of social presence, so presence, emotions, everything. And on some of those key items, we got that the person who was actually giving the information felt much more connected or present with the other than the opposite. Which means that in this case, because the other one was able to see me, so I was able maybe to express myself, I felt more present. Or maybe it's just that for the other one, because they could see everything, but they knew also that the other one couldn't see them, they kind of felt like disconnected to it. Because you can see the person, but at the same time, if we use gaze, which is a really important modality in interaction, but the person is just watching everywhere, like, okay, I don't see you, why would I just watch you? Then it may actually undermine the experience. And we actually don't know if it's the case, because it has symmetry, we actually don't know the effects, and we actually not sure even that's just not a difference in the presence at the beginning. And that's what makes it difficult in our case. The second point is that asymmetry also make it difficult to understand the other. At least in this case, one point we may consider is that when you interact with someone, you try to understand that person, you try to communicate with them. But because you also understand a bit what's happening there, because the person is there, you're in the same situation, different environment, but the medium is the same. But in this kind of case, you may not understand what's happening on the other side, because you may not understand how the robot works. You just see a robot. You see a person incarnated in a robot, but you may not be able to understand them. And that's a kind of a tricky situation, because then how, again, can you expect to know if you're actually measuring presence, in the sense that they may not be able to understand the others? So in a sense, I think asymmetry is kind of important phenomenon, an important concept, and it's not really worked on. Like, why? It's mostly because we consider that in society that symmetric is the norm. So most of our medium are symmetric, and when they're not, well, we tend to consider that they should be symmetric. Most of the research is the same way. Like when you have a phone call, the person calling you may know you better because they know who you are. They may call you for a new job, they say. So they have information about you, and then they call you, and then you answer hello, and then the norm makes it that that person will answer saying, "Oh, hello, I'm John. I'm from this company." It's kind of recreating that sensation that you're coming back to symmetry because you started knowing the person. And that's something that it's impossible here. You may know the person, but you don't know what can happen with robots. Now, I would like to go on another topic, which is measuring social experience. Why I did this to the presentation, it's because of everything I talked before, is all those issues that's happening with social avatar. And one of the points we found most important to work on was how much the medium impacts the experience. Because again, there's a kind of present in both, but in the case of such robots, we have so much things happening that kind of can break the experience, that we need to make sure to which extent the people would feel compared to the medium, and to say then after, okay, so we know that the people feel like this about the medium. We know that they should be able to work together. So now maybe we can see actually the real effect of presence. In that sense, we use different existing measures. So social presence in our minds from Professor Van Bioka, which is a measure I personally use a lot for my research. But also pictorial presence. Why the network minds? It's because for me, for my work, it felt really more like the type of question I would ask for a mediated interaction. So I try to use those sentences, those questions as a way to create a new measure, to not just to replace, obviously, but just to create an additional elements. The second one, the pictorial presence. The reason I put it here is because I'm not actually really understanding what's happening on this one. So it's a really nice picture, but if I give it to people, most of the time they don't understand it, which is weird because you consider that pictures should be understandable. And so we're like, okay, can I really give this to participants? And then my answer, and my supervisor also asked the question, I said, probably not. I should not do it. But the thing is, what we wanted to create was actually a pictorial measure. So that's why this one is, I think, is important, because there's a really good idea on it. It's just that I would personally think that it's not able to really pass the message to people. Then comes to all the constraints delivering that you measure. So you can see different type of pictures. The first one is mine. So that's, you can see as this robot, it's the robot from before. I tried to design them myself. Not really that good, but at least it was at some point understandable. Then we tried to go for AI, because AI is really good for creating pictures. The only issue is when you try to create the pictures and you try another items and the picture is completely different, so you can't really say it's the same pack of items. And the last one, I actually found a really good colleague who was really good at drawing and liked to work with children, so she had a way to draw stuff, which was really nice. And so we started discussing, and she started with feedback, and then she started with drawing, and then we got those kind of pictures. For the constraints, we had a big talk with some colleagues because I started doing pictures, I started going too high, and then somebody said, yeah, but you probably should do simple shape and line because it's easier for people to understand. Fine. And then no color and androgynous. Why? Because culturally speaking, it's better to make sure that no one have any issue with that. But also, and why we try to do those pictures, and we don't know if it works, but we at least try to do it this way, is because we want it to be understandable without words. Because this measure is also created to be used in mediated environments. So we wanted to put them in a kind of VR environment too. And obviously applicable to both sides. And here are actually the measures. So as you can see one or two measures that actually come from social presence. So physical presence, which is, would say the ability for the medium to actually disappear itself and put the controller in front. So it's kind of our being aware of the other through the robot. And emotional contagion, because one of the points of the robot is to actually able to show the emotion and transmit it from the controller to the user. In addition, and related to what we talked before about, we also added physical safety and dominance. Why? It's because of the idea that the medium may have an impact on the user. And dominance is the case. So this robot is actually big. And it was like 2 meters or something. And a lot of people were in front of robots were like this. And we wondered how much they were impacted by an effect of dominance, how much the robots would make them feel already. And it's also linked to then physical safety, because it's a robot. If it was a human, you could come, just shake hand, make a hug, perfect. But with these robots, you can have some people just saying, oh, hello. And I know some people who are ugly who actually hesitated in touching the robot because they were like, I believe you, but let's just keep it for ourselves. Collaboration, why? It's, well, we talk a lot about collaboration in VR, but the point that it's physical added a lot for us because it's not just about collaborating, obviously, but being able to collaborate physically on some objects was a big plus for people. So we also thought that it'd be a good idea to add it as an additional measurement. And the last one we added, and so the most tricky, which is emotional perception. Why tricky is, how can you say if you actually perceive the right emotion? I mean, you may react to the robot, but how can you be sure that actually the robot is actually representing the real emotion of the user? And that's a bit tricky in the sense that we are not even sure when you are in medium. If you have a medium where you don't see the real face of the user, you never know. But that's still, I think, an important question on the ability of the robot to actually represent yourself. Because if you are able to perceive that it's really the other and the other emotion are real, then you should be able to be in a setup where you could say, yeah, okay, I can feel more presence because I'm able to react with emotions. I think that's it. So thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions.
I didn't need to, but I can. There, you're allowed. Okay, so we shifted gears quite a lot. And I'm hoping, so when we put this program together, it's not by accident. I hope that's coming across. So the idea is that we keep you moving. And I'm hoping you learn back to what we heard about avatars earlier on from Katja. I hope you're seeing the mediated interaction of the puppet. I'm hoping that you're going to be able to start connecting these invisible dots that I've laid along the way. Does anybody have questions for Camille? Asa?
Yes.
Just a thought about the result with the asymmetric Zoom conversation. Just kind of, it seems, the result kind of goes nicely with like a Merleau-Ponty, like thinking of this ambiguity of the touch, touching being touched, kind of is constitutive of what is even what is self-awareness. And one of the person who is that is the one you find that actually has the stronger I forget what you was measured, was the one who was actually seen, right? So
now the one who felt the stronger connection was the one who actually was not seen.
Not seen, given, but was seen.
Was seen, yes.
Yeah. So putting it inversely, the person who was not seen was actually kind of had a deficiency in this ambiguity of the Merleau-Ponty, right? Because I'm seeing, I'm not being seen.
Yeah.
So that kind of so it's really interesting. I think it would be interesting to think of it and maybe even go further. I don't know. I think what was the exact measure? What did he exactly ask, or what was it? It
was classic social presence question. Also at the time, I felt after it, I was like, okay, probably that's not measured because it was my first study. It was a bit limited. But in the sense, it was actually co-presence. One answer to that question, and that makes it interesting because we expect that asymmetry would be somewhere, but even directly inside, make it that okay. But then what happened to presence? Because presence most of the time is symmetric when you test it, and then it asks another question: is it about giving information? Or it's about receiving it, because most of the time you consider receiving information. That's the idea of media richness. The more you have, the more you could feel connected, the more you could also feel present. But in this case, what we got was maybe it's not just about receiving, it's about giving something.
I mean, I think I'm not a psychologist, not a clinical psychologist.
Me too.
Being seen, being heard, being seen, being recognized is a really strong, I think, factor. So if you're not seen, I think it's actually. I'm wondering what other measures might correlate to that.
That's a good question. Then at some point, because the robot also talk about mental load, you see. But so this result was a bit of when we got this result, also a bit surprised in the sense that there is this idea of asymmetric media space, which say where in media space, so social media or anything, the least real information you give, the best it is. Because you don't give real information, you can create an ideal version of you. But in this case, it's the opposite. Because you don't give an ideal version, you give your real version, but you still feel connected. So that's where I'm like, the results I got, it's not like a really strong result I got. So it would ask for more people. But it's just interesting to feel like, oh, maybe there's some more precision in how you feel connected to someone. It's not just about just getting. It's really about receiving, giving. And that's what makes it, I think, asymmetry interesting.
Yes.
I loved it. That was a very interesting project. And I think, you were sort of picking up on this. So the big issue with this idea of co-presence, if you go back to Goffman's work, is he's talking about exactly this, where he's saying it's not co-presence unless I feel you're connected to me and I feel you are connected, like and I think you, and I'm aware of it. So I'm connected to you, you're connected to me, and I am aware of it, or there's like this whole reciprocal nature of it. And the difficulty in measuring that has been there's not a symmetry. Like the same items don't load when we've tried to create that that measure. That, you know, it's like, so the items that work for me thinking you're present with me aren't the same items as I feel connected to you. Yeah. But I think what you did here, which is interesting, is kind of almost created another here or there thing, right? Because it's what maybe we call robot mediated communication, because I'm there possibly physically, so you perceive me as here even though I'm there because there's a physical embodiment of me and it's a robot and isn't me. So it's a very different conceptualization.
Yes, and that makes it really difficult to actually cope with it.
Right, and then there's also the computer anxiety and the
yes. So there's all those variables and the fact also that you can't really say that I feel present or it's because of the normal way of presence, or because it's a symmetry. Because you need to first consider what's happening in both, and then say, okay, maybe in this case it's just because people feel less present in the other.
Right. Well, because you have to measure. Did you perceive presence with the robot, and did you perceive the robot as the same as the person embodying it?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Is because there's that might not be connected either.
Yeah.
Is there another question in the room? Okay, and we're going to just say thank you very much to Camille.